Now in our final segment, the European Union delegation to Sierra Leone has hosted its annual Europe Day on Tuesday, 9th May 2023. Now the Europe Day, also referred to as Schuman Day, is an annual celebration of peace and unity in Europe. In Sierra Leone, this celebration brings together more than 400 European and Sierra Leonean dignitaries and international partners. The event was an excellent opportunity for organizations to promote their image and brands and their activities through corporate sponsorship collaboration with the European Union delegation to Sierra Leone. The day was themed Solidarity and Unity. So this morning, to talk on the day and the EU's role in Sierra Leone, while also into the 2023 June 24 multi-tier elections, we have Ambassador Manuel Muller, head of the EU delegation in Sierra Leone. Good morning, Ambassador. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Fabienne. Good morning, Samuel. I'm very happy to be with you here.
Let's talk about the history of the EU Day. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, the EU Day is also called the Schuman Day and refers to the Schuman Declaration, which the former French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman has done in 1950 on the 9th of May. And the main element of it was to put together under a common control some parts of the industry of some European countries, and also to build step by step a Europe, starting with a de facto solidarity, going to a more constitutional level. And it's very important to understand this in the historic context, because as we all know, between 1870 and 1945, in Central Europe, we had three wars. There was the war between Germany and France of 1870-71. There was the First World War from 1914 to 1918. And then the Second World War from 1939 to 1945. And at that time, at the end of the 40s, the beginning of the 50s, the so-called Cold War was visible and started. And the big question was, what can be made that in the future there will be peace in Europe? And this was a starting point. And you can, of course, not build peace and a European Union within one day. It's a step-by-step policy which was taken. And I must say that Robert Schuman is one who really was the right person to do it, because his own biography shows how important it is to bring peace into the region. He was born in Luxembourg by a mother who was Luxembourgish. His mother tongue was Luxembourgish. His father was born as a French in Lorraine, but as Lorraine at that time was annexed by Germany, his father had the German citizenship, so Robert Schuman was born as a German. He studied mainly in Germany and also in other countries. He then started to be a lawyer in Lorraine, which at that time still was German, but after the First World War, it was then annexed again by France, and then he became French. And he engaged in French politics. He was in resistance against the Germans in the Second World War. And I think he understood, from coming from this biography, that you have to stop all these things of war, annexation, violence, and so on, and to bring peace to Europe. And as, of course, coal and steel are are core elements of an industry which also can be misused in times of war. This was the first step to then, in 1951, create the European Community of Coal and Steel. And 6 countries came together, and now their coal and steel industry was under a common joint control, which is very important. And in 1957, with the Rome Treaties, a European economic community was created, which then was the core of today's European Union, with 27 member states, which developed over the years. And as Robert Schuman's declaration started also in talking about a de facto solidarity which comes up. As peace is important, this de facto solidarity, the European Union, of course, today shows to Ukraine. Ukraine is victim of the Russian aggression, and our Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, for example, for celebrating Europe Day, she was in Kiev in Ukraine to clearly show our position on that. So de facto solidarity, this is very much important, and we, of course, as I mentioned, Ukraine, we know about the difficulties which the Russian aggression on Ukraine brought to food security around the world, to the food prices, to the fuel prices, make many countries suffering. We will continue in our projects we are doing here to help Sierra Leone on its way to get less import dependent, and I would be happy when we talk about our projects
as you
to come
go
back to
there,
that.
let's head to the EU's work with Sierra Leone in Sierra Leone. In what areas does the EU work with Sierra Leone?
We have a long-standing partnership with Sierra Leone, and we have accompanied the country for many years, also mainly after the civil war. And our current program, which is a program from 2021 to 2024, is a program with an overall amount of 245 million euros. Will be mainly implemented in the area that we call green economy. This includes sustainable energy and agriculture. In the area of education, which is one flagship project of the government, and also the European Union thinks that human capital development is very important. And thirdly, in the area of governance, and this includes support to different institutions, and also in the framework of support to election management bodies.
So let's get to talk. Let's first deal with governance. What are your interventions in the area of governance?
The European Union in the area of governance, for example, has one project which deals with decentralization. And we are working there with the district councils in 6 different districts and with civil society organizations. The aim of these projects are to give the possibility to the district councils to implement a better service delivery to the people, together also with the civil society. I think working together there is very much important. If you wish, I can give you some concrete examples.
Yes, please go ahead.
So, and please allow me to have a look into my notes, because as we are doing a lot in this area, I would not like to give you wrong information. So, for example, in Kenema, the district councils then have built 2 markets and recently inaugurated markets in Blama and Tongo, and these new markets then can help to revamp local business. Then also in Kenema, the district council constructed a funeral home, multi-purpose hall, roads and culverts with the support of the European Union. Something similar in Pujehun, culverts, solar panels, markets and community centers, as well as 46 water facilities. In Falaba, the district councils built feeder roads and culverts, solar panels and markets with our support. And in Karene, a community hall, for example, solar panels, culverts, markets and also grain stores. So working at this area is important because I think it's a clear policy also of the government, and we are also convinced of that decentralization can help people on the ground. And this was one of our important projects in governance. Another one, support to the electoral management bodies, for example, through technical assistance, but also through an organization which is called International IDEA, which recently arrived. which will continue even beyond the elections, working with the election monitoring bodies, with CSOs, with national election observers. And then the European Union has given a support to UNDP to assist election management bodies during the upcoming elections in some areas. For example, just recently, and I must say it's not only EU as an institution, it's also member states of the EU, like Ireland, who are contributing to that. We have together with UNDP commissioned furniture for a multi-purpose meeting room at the PPRC. They need a big room. And they have formulated this need, and UNDP, with our funds, has responded to that. So this is another example where in the area of governance we can give them support.
So now you've just mentioned the issue of support to the electoral management bodies, and also you always have observers mission and team coming in to the country. Now, the observers team, I'm pretty sure, is here right now from the EU. So, with what the EU has been doing to support in Sierra Leone's democratic process, how would you measure the impact of your technical and financial support to the electoral management, to the elections management bodies, to just keep our democracy growing?
The European Union has deployed electoral observation missions for the last 20 years at 4 previous elections, and now it's the 5th election with a full-fledged mission. I think it's important to see how this mission works. They are usually headed by a member of a European Parliament. They follow a determined methodology, and they finish with a report on the overall situation, including also giving recommendations to the electoral management bodies and the government in the country. So this year, the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Policy, Mr. Josep Borrell, has appointed Mrs. Evind Incir, who is a Swedish member of the European Parliament, to be the chief election observer of this electoral mission that will come to Sierra Leone on invitation of the Electoral Commission. And there was a previous preparation mission here in February, which talked with all the stakeholders, also to be sure if an election observation mission is wished by everyone, and there was an overall positive feedback that we got. So this is a long-term mission. So the mission will not only be here on election day. The mission has also long-term observers, and the first core team members already have arrived. And they are now building up the mission. The long-term observers arrive next week, like also the chief electoral observer. And then the mission will start to be deployed also all over the country, because they are not only here in Freetown. And on election day, around election day, some more short-term observers will come from all countries in Europe, but also Norway, Swiss and Canada, which is also part of this EU election observation teams. And they will then do the observation work on election day, the tallying. And so this is what I can give you as a background on that. Now, of course, as the mission is there, and the mission is independent, also independent from the EU delegation, much further detailed information will be provided to the stakeholders and to the broader public by the mission itself. They will also start a social media presence. We will share it on our social media website, so that people who are interested can follow.
Perhaps because it's getting very sensitive in Sierra Leone right now with the elections, 39 days to the June polls. And the fact that the team is here this early, are there engagements planned with the team, especially to meet with the Elections Commission, or the Elections Office, the PPRC, the political parties, just to have that confidence and trust in the process, and so that the observers will be able to have first-hand information from the players in the elections?
This is a very important question because, of course, the European Union Electoral Observation Mission, like all other election observation missions, of course, will interact with the main stakeholders. And the main stakeholders are the electoral management bodies, mainly ECSL and PPRC, but also all others who are related to elections, be it election security and so on. So there will be a lot of contacts also on the way towards election day. But this is then the task of the electoral observation mission, which, as I said, is independent from the delegation.
So now let's talk about directly the other areas of your interventions in Sierra Leone's development agenda. We've talked about governance. Now, take us through the other areas of interventions and how they've been impacting the growth of Sierra Leone.
Yeah. For a long time, European Union has supported large parts of the road network in Sierra Leone. This was financed out of the European Development Fund during the last decades. And 85% of the road between Liberian and Guinean border has been built by the road authority with funds coming from the European Union. And I was very happy that in 2022, 2 bridges were commissioned by President Bio to the broader public, the bridge in Mabang and the bridge in Magbele, which are also part of the projects which the road authority built with funding of the European Union. This gives interconnectivity in the region, and this is what we in Europe call the Global Gateway. The Global Gateway initiative is one of the main initiatives that European Union has with Africa, and this includes all kinds of infrastructure works. It might be roads, it might be in energy sector, it might be also in education, for example, constructions, you need also in education. And I'm very happy that this is of a lot of use to the development of the country, because these roads make it much easier to come from one place to another place. And I was told by people who knew how the situation of the roads were before, how this contributed to improvement. We have currently a very interesting program together with the International Labour Organization, which is called Opportunity Salon. And in this context, around 200 kilometers of feeder roads will be built within the upcoming 36 months. 50 kilometers have already been built, and this creates, of course, job in some regions where then also agricultural goods can be better transported. So these kinds of works where European Union is known for having funded it, I feel were very important. And of course, in the sector of green, our green sector, we will continue to work in the area of agriculture. This is important, as I mentioned at the beginning. All countries in the world now have the interest to get less import dependent on food, and the country has a high potential, and the government, private companies are working towards a more efficient use of agriculture. European Union has been in the sector, been working, for example, with SLARI, the Sierra Leonean Agricultural Research Institute, an institute which, for example, researches on which kind of crops are of better use here in the country. We have an interesting regional project, West African Competitive Program, which helps West African countries, including Sierra Leone, on creating better value chain opportunities. For example, here in Sierra Leone, WACOM, together with cooperatives and also with the private sector, has worked in the area of cocoa, cassava and palm oil, putting, for example, also palm oil mills in place, and has also worked with the Sierra Leonean Bureau of Standardization on better possibilities of standardization together with UNIDO, and now recently a new mechanism was introduced here with the support of UNIDO, which makes that Sierra Leone in the Mano River Union is the first country internationally certified with an institute internationally certified, which can establish, for example, if several standards, international standards, are fulfilled or not. So this is very important because one thing, and I mentioned the word value chain production, this is something where European Union feels we wish to continue to support the efforts of Sierra Leone to not only export primary produce, but products produced here in the country. And one element identified together with our Sierra Leonean partners as a problem is the access to finance, for example. If you are a private, small, micro or medium enterprise and you need a loan in order to set up your business, then you are confronted to interest rates which are very high. Therefore, in the framework of our next year's program for the next 36 months, we have started a partnership with UNCDF, the United Nations Capital Development Fund. They will work together with commercial banks here, and with European money there will be created a possibility to give loans to a lower interest rate, and this will allow much more of, especially the smaller and medium enterprises, to get the necessary loans to set up value chain production. And this, I think, can help boosting the economy of the country.
Usually with the international community we have in the country, they do have their set priority areas in terms of intervention to the country. What's the EU priority areas?
I mean, priority areas of our intervention are usually set together with the government. Yeah, we don't come from outside and say what we think is the best to do, but we see what the needs defined by the government are. And we work, of course, on the basis of the national development plan that the government has decided. We now, for the next years, have agreed with the government on the areas of green economy, of education, and of a continuation of our support to governance. In February 2021, there was AU-EU summit in Brussels. In this framework, the EU confirmed to President Biu that in these areas the 245 million euros will be used, and it will be implemented through different mechanisms. There are some areas where still we are defining how we will intervene and where we will intervene. There are talks going on, of course, with the Ministry of Plan. We have a very good cooperation with the Ministry of Plan, which is one of our key interlocutors, and of other ministries, but also with the civil society. We have civil society grants, for example. There was a call for proposal recently where then NGOs were chosen to intervene in the provinces, also with regards to empowering women. Perhaps I may come, if you allow, to one important area that of our intervention that we share with the government is education. Education is an investment into the future of the country, into future generations. And what is invested today in education will help in the future to develop in many of the other areas I just mentioned. The European Union, for example, has given a support to the school program, school feeding program through the World Bank. We had given 13 million euros through a World Bank Trust Fund to ensure the implementation, to contribute to ensuring the implementation of this program. And we also have invested in the renovation of 100 schools, primary schools in the country. And just an anecdote, when I arrived here in the country 1.5 years ago, one of my first visits in the provinces was for the inauguration of one of these schools by President Bio. And before the ceremony started, I was there and talked with some of the school children. And there was a boy, I asked him, what do you like in school? And then he said, mathematics. And then I asked him, yeah, and when you are adult, what would you like to be? What kind of profession? And then he said, President of the Republic. So you can see there are children with a lot of ambition. They will now have the opportunity to go through school. If this small boy wants to be president or not, I don't know. But I think we can be sure that if you have the possibility to learn in a school which is duly renovated and which allows you to undergo a normal school program, you will have the possibility later on to get a good job, and European Union is happy to contribute to that. In the past we also contributed for the work of the Teachers Commission, and in the area of education there was also support on the digitalization of the teachers' payroll, for example. So this is an area which is very important, and where we will continue activities also.
Anne Wells on Facebook says the Mabang and Mabele bridges are laudable projects. Thank you, EU. Well, we'll just take that as the vote of thanks for Sierra Leone and Wells. Thank you very much. But yes, as we wrap up the segment, in summary, what would be your closing courtesies to Sierra Leoneans and to the audience?
I'm very happy to be in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is a peaceful country. It's an excellent example that after the end of the civil war, you can come to democracy, you can come to stability. And I'm really amazed by the religious tolerance that you have here in the country. There's no religious extremism, there is no terrorism, and people are very nice and open to everyone. And I think that it's very important to underline that for the future of the country, the most important is to continue to work on the basis of peace, of democracy, of free and transparent elections, so that people are the ones who decide who are at the summit of the state to govern them. and this also contributes to sustainable development and to stability in the country. I would like to thank to all the Sierra Leoneans, to all those we are working together with. You are great people, and I wish you all the best for having peaceful, democratic, transparent and free and competitive elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Manuel Muller, for joining us this morning in the program. We appreciate your time.
Right.
Thanks to you.